Here we go. All right, well, good afternoon and welcome to gardening. I'm Dr. Pat Williams, and I'm the Residential Horticulture Extension Agent at the University of Florida IFAS Extension Office out on Clark Road. So we're really close to here. I've already given you a handout, and what we're really going to look at today is kind of exploring some very low effort gardening. A lot of people move to Florida and they realize there's this stuff in the ground that doesn't resemble soil, and they don't know how to grow in it. So what we're going to look at today are some low energy but high productivity systems. Now, first off, I don't have any kickback from any of the producers here, but this is an earth box. Come on in, there's plenty of room. Oh, that's okay.
Camera's on him.
Okay.
Yeah, if you could come over here, that way I could be like facing the camera a little bit more, or we could.
I'll leave this here. Thank you.
Welcome.
Oh, you're going to sit in my seat.
And so the first one up is an earth box, and this is a commercial product, but you can make the same thing at home. If you went to the store and picked up just a regular container, and then if you brought in 4 bricks, you could put those in the bottom, and we'll kind of show some things. This does have a drain hole, which you could just drill through the side, and pretty much you could have the same setup. This is sold as a kit, and all it really has is a little bit more fancy looking, but the plants don't care. So on the earth box, what this is a plant it and leave it system. And what it comprises of is it has a reservoir down here. And you would just use a regular potting soil that you can get from anywhere, which is going to be a peat based. And the reason you want to use a peat base is because peat has wicking action or capillary action. So like a sponge, it will draw water upward. And the whole crux of what makes this earth box work is these 2 corners right here. This corner and this corner. So when this screen goes down, which keeps most of the substrate from getting into the water, these 2 corners act as wicks. So you would start off by putting your substrate in here, pack that in, and then on the way back up, you would come up to about 2 inches from the top. So otherwise, it looks pretty much just like a container plant at this point. Before you fill, you'll want to put in your water spout, and that just attaches right there. Now once you bring it up to about 2 inches, you're going to put this dolomite lime in, and you're just going to sprinkle over. You're not going to use this whole packet, so just kind of a sprinkling over, and then you're going to mix that in a little bit. At that point, you're going to go ahead and fill it up a little bit more. And here's the thing that people kind of are amazed at, is then you're going to, depending on how you're going to plant. So if I were going to put plants along the edges, then I would put my fertilizer down the middle. And if I was going to grow down the middle, I'd put my fertilizer to the edge. If you've ever heard of ribbon application of fertilizer, they just put down a stream of fertilizer and the plant roots will come get it. This 1-pound package of fertilizer will go in completely. So you will dig a trench in through here, put all of this in. You're not going to incorporate it, you're going to leave it right there. Now if you're going to do this at home, this is a granular, so it's not slow release or anything else like that. You want to get a regular dilutable or soluble fertilizer. You don't want to use a liquid because it needs to be in the granule form because it needs to stay there for a longer time. Once the fertilizer is in there, you're going to cover over it with more substrate, and then you kind of mound this up just a little bit. You can go up above. So what the whole system is once water is applied here, then it's going to wick up and evenly distribute moisture throughout the whole thing. As you start to finish off, and this is depending on whether it's necessary or not, but these are kind of disposable, and this comes in 3 different colors. So if it's really, really, really cold outside, then you want to put the black surface up. If it's really hot, you want to put the white surface up. And depending on what you're growing, they actually make covers in red. And plants use predominantly 2 wavelengths in the visible spectrum. They use a blue light and a red light. So the blue light is what we get from fluorescent lights. And so if you were just going to grow something like an herb, then that would be fine, or else this can also go outside. But if you're growing something like a tomato and you need fruit, they use that red light. So if you had a red covering on here, it would reflect more red light to the plant and be more likely to fruit quicker.
With the red light, the red facing down.
No, it would face up, so that the leaf canopies would be subjected to that. Then, once this is on, then you would cut X slits wherever you wanted to plant. I would probably be careful with seeds. I might want to get them started a little bit beforehand. Otherwise, I wouldn't put the plastic on, because once you make the slit, the flaps will cover the seed area. But if you're just going to go and buy a 6-pack or something at the store of an herb or a vegetable, then those would go in. And then once this is here, it should be it. You can check the water system every once in a while, and you don't have to worry about overfilling because the drain is right here. Now with that drain, that would be the only concern to having it indoors or something like that. But if it's on the pool deck or out on the patio, you can't add too much water. Other than that, that's an earth box. So when you hear all this stuff, and I've had people tell me that things just grow and grow and grow, of course, the dolomitic lime helps with the nutrient uptake, and then of course the fertilizers are in there. So any questions on earth boxes?
Can you tell me, I've been trying to grow a tomato that tastes like something, and if I use the right soil on that, would it actually grow? Like if I use, a tomato that actually does taste, and I planted it in there, would it grow?
Yes, it would grow perfectly, because this is an artificial setting. It's not the ground.
Is there particular, and that dirt will work too? Soil that comes?
Well, this is a substrate, so peat-based. So it has no soil in it. It's peat moss, perlite, vermiculite, and things like that. But it's what they would use at a nursery or a greenhouse to grow plants in that you would buy to begin with to put in there. So any other questions on the earth box? Come up front. We've got plenty of room. Oh, there's a big crowd now. All right, next up. I did not. It depends. Online, this was right at $50. It also does come with casters, so you could move it around. I didn't put those on today. They come in different sizes. They have a junior size, which is a little bit smaller. But as we started off by saying, if you didn't want to buy this, you could go to a home store and purchase everything and make it work. All right. Next up, the second one on your list is called a Kratky system. How many of you have heard about hydroponics? So hydroponics is using a solution based with nutrients to grow. Well, most of those systems need moving water. And the Kratky system, which was developed at the University of Hawaii, is a no movement system. Now, this was a fairly inexpensive box, and at the time it was clear. We just spray painted it black, and the reason we spray painted it black was to keep the sunlight out so that the water and nutrients doesn't turn to algae inside, because we are going to be putting nutrient solution. This was plain water in here, but this is going to be our fertilizer water in here. And basically all you need to do is plant these containers, and there's different mechanisms to do that. This is a hydroponic ceramic pellet, and they tend not to wick up, so if you're going to be doing seeds and stuff like that, maybe not the best, but if you're going to be doing seedlings, then it's okay. But this is a cost that you don't need to expend. So what I would do in this system is I would take the same substrate that you bought for this and just fill up these baskets. Let me pass this one around. Can you catch? And what this does is it allows moisture to come in from the sides and the bottom of the pot. So once you plant this, and the only tools you would really need to do this besides the paint, unless you bought like a dark gray or a dark green container, would be something to cut the holes in the top. And you can do that with either a Sawzall, which would probably be the easiest thing. That's what we used. And I think we might have even, well, we did use a Sawzall. You can buy these online. They're just a little hydroponic basket, and you want to put it so that it doesn't sit all the way down. Now, when these go in, You want them all to be even, and this is going to be your level of nutrient solution in the box. You would mix it up just like you were going to do a normal liquid feed, and you would fill this all the way up to about here. Once you set this in, the bottom should be touching, and what I like to do is keep one out and empty, and so as I fill it, I can just see it barely touches. Make sure that when you plant it, this is moist, so in case it's not quite touching, then it will still germinate and or keep your seedlings growing. Once the roots start to come out of the basket, they're going to start taking up the nutrient solution. Now, a lot of people think that you need to keep adding more nutrient solution, but what will happen is the roots, as the water drops in there, they will develop air rootlets, and they are perfectly happy growing in the dark in the air. So once you put the water in, you never have to do anything ever again. If you want to move it around to light, that's fine. We grow lettuce in this all the time, and we'll put 3 or 4 different types of just a leaf lettuce in here for salads. And as they grow, you can harvest the outside or the older leaves. And I mean, this is just a small box. I've got a box at home that has 8 on the top, but we've also used even things like coffee cans where you just have a single one. So that's the Kratky. And talk about no maintenance. Once you put it in, it's done, and you're ready to go. Now, your third one is what we call a floating hydroponic garden. And this is developed out of the University of Florida, and there's an extension address on there. And basically, the only difference between this, the Kratky, and the floating bed is we build a frame. So you might want to build it out of like 2x6 or something like that, and you can just build a simple box. And then this is foam insulation, or you can use a styrofoam, but I like this because it tends to stay a little bit longer, and it also gives me some reflective light coming up. And all I want to do then is go ahead and cut a hole, and I want to make sure that when this comes through, unlike the Kratky where I want it to sit down deep, I'm just going to keep this one just about like that. Because what's going to happen is this is going to be cut to the inside of the box. So if your box is 18 inches by 18 inches on the inside, this should be about 17 3/4 by 17 3/4 because it's actually going to float on the water. So as the water gets used up, it will drop. So we don't need that to be sitting like that because then you would have saturated all the time. So as long as it's just touching there right at the bottom, it will wick up water once again by capillary action, and there it is. You would use the same nutrient type of solution that you would put in here, and the directions are in the articles and you can find those online. But otherwise that's a plant it and forget it. So we're really all about no effort today for gain. The last item we have is fairly new. How many of you have eaten sprouts? So sprouts have been around for a long time. But sprouts as an industry has one problem that they've been dealing with, and that's when you eat the sprout, you eat the whole plant. So you're eating the root. Microgreens is kind of the same thing, but we harvest it by cutting off the stem above ground. So we're not having to deal with the same sanitary cleaning of the product before it goes to market. And this was a little kit we got at the State Master Gardener conference this year. And they gave it out, so it's kind of simple, but you could do something a little bit different. And this is just a little tin. You would go ahead and use the same substrate that you would use for all these other ones, and you would put it in here. Now, with microgreens, have any of you tried microgreens? They make microgreen energy drinks and stuff like that. Dr. Abby in our office had one yesterday, and so when I said microgreens, she kind of came over and listened because it's all different. But what you're using is you're using the seedlings, and in this case, this packet came with radishes. Now, how many of you have ever used all the different kind of designer leaf lettuces? You know, some of those are a little bit more bitter and some are more tart, or if you've ever used mustard greens, they've got a little bit of bite to it. So every one of the seedlings will have its own flavor. And the nice thing about the microgreens is sometimes if I buy a packet of radishes, I may plant a dozen in my garden because I'm not going to eat 200 radishes. But where the microgreen comes in is then you would come in with all your seeds that are left, and you would sow those in, cover them slightly, and all you really need to do is have just even a light indoors. So you can do this as long as you don't have cats like we do. but put it under a lamp, fluorescent or whatever else you have. Make sure you've got a saucer and water it. When the sprouts get about 3 or 4 inches tall, you just use the scissors and cut them, and they go right into a salad and or a garnish, or if you're making a main dish, they can add color. But each of the seedlings will have a little bit of a different flavor. So the radish has a little bit more of a tang bite to it, but this will work toward anything. So you could use it the same way you use sprouts in sandwiches or salads, and even blend them in your smoothies and things like that.
So you're using this same basket to do that?
Not for this.
Okay.
Here you would want to use something that's a regular pot that you would have laying around. It doesn't have to be all that deep, because it's not going to stay there longer than about a week and a half, 2 weeks after it germinates. Now, the only difference with this is you'll go through a lot of seeds, because each one will produce one seedling. So if you look, I have a handout here. You can kind of see on the back page that when they're growing them, they're going to be just completely covered. So it's a whole flat, and they'll do this on a much larger scale. With that, we've looked at 4 plant it pretty much and go. Now, this isn't really something to do outside, but this is for people who have apartments. This is for people that don't want to go outside when it's hot. And most of these systems outside of the last one with the microgreens can be outside and can be left and forgotten. So are there any questions? All right. Well, thank you very much for coming today. And remember, I'm Dr. Pat Williams from the University of Florida Extension Office, and we're out on Clark Road at Twin Lakes Park. And we're open 5 days a week from 8 to 5, and we're there to help you with all sorts of questions.